In our previous video, we have understood the history of our Indian Constitution, how East India Company ruled over us, how British came to India, and how they started ruling us. So in today's video, we are going to understand the very next chapter of Indian polity, that is making of the Indian Constitution. So let's move into the very first slide, which talks about demand for a Constituent Assembly. It was in 1934 that the idea of a Constituent Assembly for India was put forward for the first time by M.N. Roy, a pioneer of communist movement in India. So we have got our independence, but how we are supposed to rule over our country if we don't have a proper document, a set of guidelines, a set of rules? So that was the very reason why it was the need of the hour of that time that we need a Constituent Assembly to draft our very constitution. In 1935, the Indian National Congress (INC) for the first time officially demanded a Constituent Assembly to frame the Constitution of India. So it was on the mind of every people back then that now that we got our very independence, we need a proper document which will embody all the necessary details, information, set of guidelines, and all such things. But before drafting such a document, we need a proper committee or a proper what do I say? Proper committee or a proper a group of people who will be assisting in making that particular draft. In 1938, Jawaharlal Nehru, on behalf of the Indian National Congress, declared that the Constitution of Free India must be framed without outside interference by a Constituent Assembly elected on the basis of adult franchise. So now everyone was agreeing on the point that we need a constitution of our own. But what should be the constitution be like? What should be the set of guidelines that should be incorporated? So it was said that the constitution would be of such nature that there wouldn't be any interference from outsiders or outside people. The demand was finally accepted in principle by the British government in what is known as the August Offer of 1940. So the demand was basically accepted, which is known as the August Offer in the year of 1940. In 1942, Sir Stafford Cripps, a member of the cabinet, came to India with a draft proposal of the British government on the framing of the Indian Constitution to be adopted after the World War II. So this is the scenario after World War II. So a British come with the proposal of drafting the Constituent Assembly for preparing a constitution for India. The Cripps proposal was rejected by the Muslim League, which wanted India to be divided into two autonomous states with two separate constituent assemblies. But the idea that the British member brought in was rejected by the Muslim League because Muslim League wanted a separate place for the Muslim people. Finally, a cabinet mission was sent to India. While it rejected the idea of two constituent assembly, it put forth a scheme for a constituent assembly which more or less satisfied the Muslim League. So again, it was rejected, but later they came with another proposal, which, however, kind of satisfied the Muslim League. Then we will see composition of the Constituent Assembly. The Constituent Assembly was constituted in November 1946 under the scheme formulated by the Cabinet Mission Plan. So this is the year of 1946. Now this has some kind of features. The total strength of the Constituent Assembly was to be 389. Of these, 296 seats were to be allotted to British India and 93 seats to the princely state. Out of 296 seats allotted to the British India, 292 members were to be drawn from the 11 governor provinces and 4 from the 4 chief commissioner provinces, 1 from each. Now that we, the idea was accepted and the proposal was accepted. Now we will be composing a constituent assembly. Now it was the question who would be the member of that particular assembly, from what reason people will be coming into the particular assembly, what will be the religion, from where the representative will come and represented in the constituent assembly. So that was the question which has been given here in the form of features. Then we have each provinces and princely state on a group of seats. In case of small state, were to be allotted seats in proportion of the respective population. Roughly one seat was to be allotted for every million population. So this is how the people were divided on the basis of religion, on the basis of population. Seats allocated to each British provinces were to be divided among the three principal communities: Muslim, Sikhs, general, all except Muslim and Sikhs in proportion to the population. Now that the idea was of Britishers, earlier in our previous video, we got to know that how they bring the religious differences among us, and on that basis, the allotted seats were divided for such people. The representative of each community were to be elected by the members of that community in the provincial legislative assembly, and voting was to be by the method of proportional representation by means of a single transferable vote. So this is the kind of voting system that was adopted in order to bring members to the Constituent Assembly. The representative of the princely states were to be nominated by the heads of the princely. So some of the people were elected, some of the people were nominated. So it was a both partly elected and partly nominated kind of assembly. It is thus clear that the Constituent Assembly was to be a partly elected and partly nominated body. Moreover, the members were to be indirectly elected by the members of the provincial assemblies who themselves were elected on a limited franchise. So the method was indirect mode of election. The the constituent the election to the Constituent Assembly for 296 allotted to the British India provinces was held on in July August 1946, so it is the very year. The Indian National Congress owned 208 seats. So it is the result of that particular vote. The Muslim League owned 73 seats, and the small groups and independents got the remaining 15 seats. However, the 93 seats allotted to the princely state were not filed as they decided to stay away from the Constituent Assembly, but they decided that they will not be part of the Constituent Assembly. Although the Constituent Assembly was not directly elected by the people of India on the basis of adult franchise, the Assembly comprised representatives for all sections of the Indian society, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Parsis, Anglo-Indian, Eastern Christian, SC, ST, including women of all these sections. The assembly included all important personalities in India at the time, with the exception of Mahatma Gandhi. So all kind of important person was included into the assembly, excluding Mahatma Gandhi. Now that we got the assembly, now it is the time for the working of the Constituent Assembly. The Constituent Assembly held its first meeting on December 9, 1946. So it was their first meeting on behalf of making of the constitution. The Muslim League boycotted the meeting and insisted on a separate state of Pakistan. So the Muslim League were already, asking for a different place for the people. So they have kind of boycotted this assembly. The meeting was thus attended by only 211 members. Dr. Sachinandana Sinha, the oldest member, was elected as the temporary president of the assembly following the French practice. So what it says, French practice in French, the elder people or the older people is uh, elected for choosing the other people from that particular job or that particular kind of work. So this rule has been adopted in India for the Constituent Assembly back then. Later, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as the president of the assembly. So this is an important point to note down. Similarly, both S.C. Mukherjee and V.T. Krishnamacharya was elected as the vice presidents of the assembly. In other words, the assembly had two vice presidents. So for this Constituent Assembly, we have two presidents. Then we have objective resolution that is given by the Jawaharlal Nehru. For example, whenever we need to prepare something, be it an answer, be it any other work, we need a kind of a draft or we need a kind of a demo so that we can see and learn, and on that basis we can prepare something similar. So that was the very reason behind Jawaharlal Nehru's objective resolution. It is kind of a demo, or it is kind of draft which has been given to the Constituent Assembly members so that they can see and understand what should be the thing that should be incorporated in the very Indian Constitution. On December 13, 1946, Jawaharlal Nehru moved the historic objective resolution in the Assembly. So he presented this. It laid down the fundamentals and philosophy of the constitutional structure. As I said, it is embodied with the kind of fundamentals and philosophy of the Constitution. This Constituent Assembly declares its firm and solemn resolve to proclaim India as an independent sovereign republic and to draw up for her future governance a constitution. So if you have read preamble, so you can see these are the very words that we have in our preamble, which came from Jawaharlal Nehru's objective resolution. Then we have wherein the territories that now comprise British India, the territories that now from the Indian states and some other parts of India as are outside India and the states as well as other territories that are willingly to be constituted into an independent sovereign India shall be a union of them all. So India was in a kind of a miscellaneous position back then because British came, they rule, and they have princely state, and there are also some areas where the king ruled. Some are the areas from where British have gone. So it was a kind of a miscellaneous kind of position back then. But in this objective resolution, the Jawaharlal Nehru had stated that everything would be a union of them all, comprising all of them together, wherein the state territories, whether with their present boundaries or with such others as may be determined by the Constituent Assembly, and thereafter according to the law of the Constitution, shall possess and retain the status of autonomous units together with residuary powers, and exercise all powers and functions of government and administration, save and except such powers and functions as the administration save vested in or assigned to the union, or as are inherent or implied in the union resulting therefrom. And then we have wherein all powers and authority to sovereign independent India, its constituent powers and organs of government derived from the people. So basically we got to know the Indian constitution is for the people, by the people. So it is the very objective that we follow. Then next we have wherein shall be guaranteed secure to all the people of India, justice, social, economic, and political equality. So this is the very words that has been enshrined in the preamble itself. Then we have safeguards shall be provided for minorities. As we all know, we have certain protection for minorities. So this is the kind of resolution which given in the objective resolution. Integrity of territory of republic and sovereign. So this is the kind of a sum up of points from the Indian constitution itself, from the Indian preamble or the whole constitution itself. The ancient land that is rightfully honored place in the world. So now you also have this place that we will make this place worth watching, or we will make this place a better place for humankind. So these are the kind of resolution that has been passed. This resolution was unanimously adopted by the Assembly on January 22, 1947. So the draft was presented and everyone agreed with the kind of point that has been incorporated, and they're like these are the good points. On that basis we can prepare a proper document which will be known as the Constitution of India. It influenced the eventual shaping of the Constitution through all its subsequent stages. Its modified version from the preamble of the present Constitution. As I said, these are the very words that have been incorporated in the preamble itself. Changes by the Independent Act. The representatives of the princely state who had stayed away from the Constituent Assembly gradually joined it. So earlier British were, wasn't joining the assembly, later they joined in this particular year. On April 20, 1947, representatives of the six states were part of the assembly after the acceptance of the Mountbatten Plan of June 3, 1947. To partition of the country, the representatives of most of the other princely states took their seats in the assembly. So earlier, some states denied to be into the assembly. Later, they also joined after reading that objective resolution. The members of the Muslim League from the Indian Union also entered the assembly. So earlier Muslim League also boycotted the assembly, but later they also joined. The Indian Independence Act of 1947 made the following three changes in the position of the assembly. So now these are the changes that have been made in the Constituent Assembly. The assembly was made a fully sovereign body which could frame any constitution it pleased. The act empowered the assembly to abrogate or alter any law made by the British Parliament in relation to India. Now that we got our independence, so now whatever the British will say, we are not going to listen at any cost. So this is the summary that has been given in this particular point. The assembly also become a legislative body. In other words, two separate functions were assigned to the assembly, for that is making the constitution for free India and enacting ordinary laws for the country. These two tasks were to be performed on separate days. So basically, the job has been divided to the Constituent Assembly, that we need a particular constitution to run our very country. Thus, the Assembly became the first parliament of Free India. Dominion legislature, whenever the Assembly met as a constituent body, was chaired by Dr. Ravindra Prasad, and when it met as a legislative body, it was chaired by G.V. Aurangkar. These two functions continued till November 26, 1949, when the task of making the constitution was over. So when the task is already over, so there is no point of keeping that particular point. The Muslim League members hailing from the areas included in the Pakistan withdrew from the Constituent Assembly for India. Consequently, the structure of the assembly came down to 99 as against 89, originally fixed in 1946 under the Cabinet Mission Plan. The state of the Indian provinces, formerly British provinces, was reduced from 296 to 29, and those of the princely state from 93 to 70. The state-wise members of the assembly as on September 31, 1947. So this is basically said how the number has changed. Earlier some boycotted the assembly, later they have joined, how the number reduced, all this thing has been mentioned in this particular paragraph. Other functions performed. In addition to the making of the constitution and enacting ordinary law, the Constituent Assembly also performed the following function. So these are also the tasks given to the Constituent Assembly. It ratified the India's membership of the Commonwealth in May 1947. It adopted the national flag. So these are the very year that you need to remember in order to answer the MCQ and to attain the proper marks on which year this particular thing has been adopted. In all, the Constituent Assembly had 11 sessions over 2 years. 11 months and 18 days, the constitution makers had gone through the constitution of about 60 countries, and the draft constitution was considered for 114 days. So basically, it's talking about when we need to prepare a particular answer. I'm putting it in very simple words. When we are supposed to answer a particular answer, before answering that particular answer, we will we have to go through various PDFs, various notes, various books. On basis of all the kind of sources we get, we prepare our own kind of answer. So this is what the Constituent Assembly had done. They have watched or scrutinized the other constitution of other countries, and on that basis they have prepared a particular document or similar kind of document for India. The total expenditure incurred on making the constitution amounted to 64 lakhs. So it is the total amount. On January 24, 1950, the Constituent Assembly held its final session. It, however, did not end, continued at the Provisional Parliament of India from January 26, 1950 till the formation of new parliament after the first general election in 1951-52. So the process has been ongoing. The job to draft a constitution for India. Then we have committees of the Constituent Assembly. So now that we have our Constituent Assembly, and the job that has been given to Constituent Assembly was to prepare a draft, or was to prepare a kind of a document for the free India. But in order to do that big task, we need a group of people. So this was the very reason why we have various committees. Some of them were major, some of them were minor. And one on that basis, task has been divided that this particular committee will look after this particular thing. This particular committee will look after this particular thing. So, like that, the job has been divided to make the job more smoother. The Constituent Assembly appointed a number of committees to deal with different tasks of constitution making. Out of these, 8 were major committees and other were minor committees. The names of these are given below. So this is the very list of committees, and these are the minor committees. So you can write them down with the chairperson. Then we have drafting committee, which has its importance. Among all the committees of the Constituent, the most important committee was the drafting committee set up on August 29, 1947. So this is the year, or this is the time period when it was adopted. It was this committee that was entrusted with the task of preparing a draft of the new constitution. So till now we have given various tasks to various different committees. Among all this, the drafting committee has utmost important because it has the paramount task, or the very important task, to prepare the draft for the Indian constitution. It consisted of 7 members. These are the people who were entrusted with their duty. The drafting committee, after taking into consideration the proposals of the various committees, prepared the final draft of the Constitution of India. So they have taken reports given by the minor and major committees. On that basis, they have prepared their own work and the draft, which was published in February 1940. The people of India were given 8 months to discuss the draft and propose amendments. So now the draft has been prepared, so it has to be discussed among all the other members in order to do amendment, in order to add, in order to alter something. So they took at least 8 months to discuss the draft and to propose amendments. In the light of the public comment, criticism, and suggestions, the drafting committee prepared a second draft, which was published in October 1948. So the first draft was completed. It was it was presented in front of the members. They discussed it. They given their suggestion, and on that basis, they have prepared a second draft. The drafting committee took less than 6 months to prepare its draft. In all, it said only for 141 days. So later they took 141 days to add all the amendments, all kind of suggestions that given to them by the other members of the Constituent Assembly. Now we have enactment of the Constitution. Now the draft is prepared. Now it's time for the enactment of that Constitution. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar introduced the final draft of the Constitution in the Assembly of November 1948 in the first reading. So, this is the year when the draft was introduced. The Assembly had a general discussion on it for 5 days till November 8, 1914. Just because we have this lengthy constitution, that's why it was a little time consuming and it took a good amount of time to discuss the whole draft. The second reading, clause by clause consideration, started on November 15 and 14 and ended on October 17 and 49. So it is the basically date on how many time they have taken in order to read clause by clause. During this stage, as many as 7,653 amendments were proposed and 2,470 were actually discussed in the Assembly. So this was the amount of amendments that has been given to them. It was a huge task to do and to go through all kind of things. The third reading of the draft started on November 14, 1945. So till now, the second reading has been done. It was time for the third reading. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar moved a motion the Constitution as settled by the Assembly be passed. The motion of draft Constitution was declared as passed on November 26, 1949 and received the signatures of the members and the President. Now, after the third reading, it was finally passed that the draft is now ready. There is no error. Out of a total of 99 members of the Assembly, only 284 were actually present on that day and signed the Constitution. So those who were present, they have signed the Constitution that now it is fully prepared to be enacted. This is also the date mentioned in the preamble, the date of which the people of India and Constitution Assembly adopted, enacted, and accepted themselves this Constitution. So when I discussed preamble of the Constitution, I also mentioned that if the particular date has been mentioned in the preamble itself. The Constitution as adopted on November 26, 1940 contained a preamble, 395 articles and 8 schedules. So this is basically the original articles and schedules that we have at the time of enactment of the Constitution. Later, many amendment has been made, many articles has been added, many article has been removed. So this was the number of articles that we have. The preamble was enacted after the Indian Constitution was already enacted. At this point also I have discussed while dealing with the preamble of the Constitution. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, then the Law Minister, piloted the draft Constitution of the Assembly. So Dr. B.R. Ambedkar holds a very important position when it comes to the making of the Indian Constitution. He took a very prominent part in the deliberation of the Assembly. He was known for his logical, forceful, and persuasive arguments on the floor of the Assembly. He is recognized as the father of the Constitution of India. So at this point, you need to remember who is known as the father of the Indian Constitution of India. So these are the small points that you need to note down while going through this particular video. This brilliant writer, constitution expert, and disputedly the scheduled caste and chief architect of the constitution is also known as a modern Manu. So this you can write Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Then by using bullet points, you can write also known as the father of the Constitution of India, modern Manu, and all the kind of other points that have been given here. Then it is the time for the enforcement of the Constitution. Some provisions of the Constitution pertaining to citizenship, election, provisional parliament, temporary and transitional provision in short title contained in Article 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 60, 24, 26, 27, 80, 88, 91, 92, 92, and 3 came into force on the 26 and 59 itself. The remaining provision, the major part of the Constitution, came into force on January 26, 1950. This day is referred to in the Constitution as the date of its commencement and is celebrated the Republic Day. January 26 was specifically chosen as the date of commencement of the Constitution because of its historical importance. Now this answers why Constituent Assembly chosen this particular date to make the Constitution declare to the people. So on that reason or on that question you can write down this particular paragraph, which basically says what is the reason behind choosing this particular date. With the commencement of the Constitution, the Indian Independence Act of 1947 and Government of India Act of 1935, with all enactments amending or supplement the latter act were repealed. So earlier we didn't have constitution of our own, but we have certain acts. Now that we have a proper guidelines, a set of rules, so certain acts has been abolished or altered. So these are two acts which has been repealed. The abolition of Privy Council Jurisdiction Act was however continued. So this was the sole act which continued after the enforcement of the Constitution. Then we have Experts Committee of the Congress. While elections to the Constituent Assembly were still in progress on July 8, 1946, the Communist Party Indian appointed an Experts Committee with the purpose of preparing material for the Constitution. So when the election was ongoing, a committee by the Congress was already appointed with the task of that whoever will win the election. So these are the tasks that they had to do. Uh, and these are the members of that expert committee. Later on, the chairman proposed to resolve that Krishna Krishnapalli be co-opted as member and convener of the committee. So this has been a particular change that has been made. The committee had two sittings. First at New Delhi from July 20 to 2046 and the second at Bombay from August 15 to 17, 1946. So there are basically two sittings. Apart from a number of notes prepared by its members, the committee discussed the procedure to be adopted by the Constituent Assembly, the question of the appointment of various committees, and the draft of a resolution of the objective of the Constitution to be moved during the first session of the Constituent Assembly. So basically, in simple terms, what it says, for example, a highway, the construction of highway is, you know, happening. So basically what happens if there is a highway, the car will go, the bike will go. So basically the very job was of expert committee was to make sure that the car has this particular limit, the bikes should have helmets on. So these are the kind of small point that the expert committee has already written down before making of this particular highway. So this is basically the summary of why the expert committee was there and what was the task that has been wasted upon them. Next, we have on the role played by the Constitution by the committee in the making the Constitution, Granville Austin, a British constitutional expert, observed it was the Congress expert committee set in the road to her present constitution. So while election was ongoing or when the people were there for the election, they have already one step ahead with all the preparation of what should be there in the Constituent Assembly. And this was the remark given by Granville Austin. The committee members working within the framework of the Cabinet Mission Scheme made general suggestions about autonomous areas, the power of provincial government and the center, and about such issues as the principal state and the amending power. They also drafted a resolution closely resembling the objective resolution. So this is the task of the experts committee of the Congress. Now we have criticism of the Constituent Assembly. As I said earlier also that this is what do I say? The beauty of Indian polity that after every chapter there is a point we say the criticism of the Constituent Assembly, which basically showcases the kind of flaw, faults or loopholes that the particular system has. So now let's see what are the criticism. The critics have criticized the Constituent Assembly on various grounds. First, that is, it is not a representative body. The critics argue that the Constituent Assembly was not a representative body as its members were not directly elected by the people of India on the basis of union, universal adult franchise. So as I said, the members that has been adopted in the Constituent Assembly, some were nominated, some were elected. That's why the critics said it is not a representative body. That it says not a sovereign body. The critics maintained the Constituent Assembly was not a sovereign body as it was created by the proposals of the British government. So British government was the one who has finally proposed this idea. That's what the critic says they are not sovereign because they have adopted the idea given by the British. Further, they say that the assembly held its session with the permission of the British government. Just because they are adopting the idea given by the British, they are taking permission. That's why they are not a sovereign body. Then it says time consuming. That's because the drafting committee or the whole Constituent Assembly took a good amount of time in order to incorporate, in order to prepare the whole draft. That's why it said that time consuming. According to the critics, the Constituent Assembly took unduly long time to make the Constitution. They stated that the framers of the American Constitution took only 4 months to complete their work. In this context, Naziruddin Ahmed, a member of the Constituent Assembly, coined a new name for the drafting committee to show it his contempt for it. He called it the drifting committee. So they have already said that if the Americans can take less amount of time, why the members of the India cannot? Well, couldn't. So that's why they said it is time consuming. The members were deliberately, what do I say, delaying their work, and it took a good amount of time to prepare the particular constitution or the draft. Dominated by Congress, the critics charged that the Constituent Assembly was dominated by the Congress Party. Granville Austin, an American constitution expert, remarked, the Constituent Assembly was a one-party body in essentially one-party country. The Assembly was the Congress, and the Congress was India. So basically, at the time, the Congress was kind of having all kind of authority. They have this expert committee. There were members, and they, basically it was presumed that they will be the members of the Constituent Assembly itself. So people say that India is basically Congress and Congress is basically India. So this is the particular criticism that has been coming from. Then we have lawyer politician dominion. So if we look back the history, we see most of them were lawyers, be it Mahatma Gandhi, be it other people. So they basically said that the field was basically dominated by politicians and lawyers as well. It is also maintained by the critics that the Constituent Assembly was dominated by lawyers and politicians. They pointed out the other sections of society were not sufficiently represented. This to them is the main reason for the balconies and complicated language of the Constitution. The critic says basically the people who were the part of the Constituent Assembly, either they were lawyer or politician. The other part of the people were not represented properly. That's why some of the provisions or the very language of the Constitution is lengthy and is tough for normal people to understand. It is dominated. Next, we have dominated by Hindus. According to some critics, the Constituent Assembly was a Hindu-dominated body. Lord Viscount Simon called it a body of Hindus. Similarly, Winston Churchill commented that the Constituent Assembly represented only one major community in India. So, while learning this criticism, write down the particular person or whatever they have said with an arrow so that you remember the exact statement they have given on the making of the very constitution. So now let us come to some important facts relating to the making of the constitution. Elephant was adopted as a symbol of the Constituent Assembly. So they have particular symbol that is elephant. So I guess AGP has the symbol of elephant if I am not wrong. So like that they have also a particular symbol that is elephant. Sir B.N. Rao was appointed as the Constitution Advisor to the Constituent Assembly. So a particular advisor was appointed. H.B.R. Iyengar was the Secretary to the Constituent Assembly. S.N. Mukherjee was the Chief Draftsman of the Constitution in the Constituent Assembly. Prem Bihari Narayan Rajada was the calligrapher of the Constitution. They have, the person has written beautifully using calligraphy. The original Constitution handwritten by him in a flowing italic style. So it was handwritten by this particular person with a very beautiful handwriting. The original version was beautified, decorated parties from Santiniketan, including Nanlal Bose and Biohar and Ram Manohar Sinha. So when you notice that preamble, you see the border was, has a particular design which is very beautiful, and this is the very person behind that particular design. Biohar Ram Manohar Sinha illuminated, beautified, ornamented the original preamble calligraphed by Prem Bahari Narayan Rai. So they not only drafted the constitution, but they were kind of presented it in a very beautiful manner using calligraphy, by handwriting it, by making it, ornamenting it. So there, these are the all kind of decoration they have prepared over the Indian Constitution. The calligraphy of the Hindi version of the original Constitution was done by Basant Krishna Vadyan, elegantly decorated and illuminated by Nanlal Bose. So these are the points, you can write them down. Then we have Hindi text of the Constitution. So basically, before the independence, the British was ruling over us. So basically, the main language was English. All the kind of acts, charter acts, speech in the acts, commission, mission, whatever we have, everything was in English only. So when the Constitution Assembly also was doing their job, it was in their mind that they were also doing it in that very language itself, that is English. But English wasn't our language; it was the language that given or ruled by the British. So later, the idea was struck that we need a translated version of the Constitution in Hindi. Hindi text of the Constitution. Originally, the Constitution of India did not make any provision with respect to an authoritative text of the Constitution in Hindi language. So earlier, there was no idea struck in anyone's mind. Later, a provision in this regard was made by the 58 Constitutional Amendment Act of 1987. At this point, you need to remember on which amendment Act, the text of Hindi has been adopted or added. This amendment inserted a new Article 394A in the last part of the Constitution. It's Part 12. This article contains the following provision. We get the point of Article 394A, which says the President shall cause to be published under his authority. The translation of the Constitution in Hindi language. So it was said that a Constitution should be written in Hindi language. The modification which are necessary to bring in conformity with the language, style, and terminology authoritative text of the central acts in Hindi can be made in it. So basically, these 3 points say that under this article, the exact text of the Indian Constitution, which is written in English, should be translated in Hindi. And in doing so, the meaning that has been given in the English document should not be changed while translating it. Everything should be in conformity with the original text. And if there is any what do I say error seen, the precedent, it says this last point, it says the translation of the Constitution is amendment published shall be deemed to be for all purposes or text in Hindi. The translation of the Constitution to any amendment published shall be construed or the same meaning as original. The President shall cause the Hindi text to be revised suitably. So everything, all the amendments, all the provisions, all the clauses should be translated in Hindi, and if there is any error, the president will revise it, scrutinize in, and will make sure that it is in conformity with the original text that is written in English. So this is basically the making of the Indian Constitution, how the assembly was drafted, what was the role of drafting committee, why it is called as drafting committee, who are the important members of the committee, be it major, be it minor, what are the chairpersons, so all the things we have discussed in this video. So soon we'll be meeting with another such topics. If you found this video worth watching, to like, share and comment so that it motivates me to bring such more topics in future. That's all for today. Thank you for watching the video.